Actually, a clinician and does this every day for a living. We were great. We were glad to have him on last year to be able to do a piece for us. To come back on this year to even take it a little bit farther. So, without any further ado, we know that there are going to be people coming in, but we want to just go ahead, have you put your hands together and appreciate, amen, the gift that God has given us in His presence.
God. I do want to give honor to God. God is good to me all the time, and all the time, God is good. I do give honor to Pastor Jackson, Superintendent Jackson. There are several, I like to respect everybody. I have a lot of respect for everybody. Then there are just some that's on a whole nother level. You know, my dad is up there, and then my pastor I grew up under, he's up there as well. But Pastor Jackson and First Lady Jackson are two of the ones I just have just so much respect for. So I appreciate the opportunity you've given to me to speak to the people regarding this. I do want to apologize for last night. It was my mistake, my error, and I want to apologize for those of you who were here on last night. But I'm here tonight. I'm ready to do my thing, ready to do what I do. Amen. So let me just kind of just start off by just kind of telling my testimony a little bit. I was born and raised in church. I'm 55 years old. I was born and raised in church, like church all my life. There's a 2-year period that I had my prodigal son years. I was out there kind of ripping and running, trying to do my little thing, but the Lord brought me back in. I say that because it was really in around 2000, 2001-ish, around that time, where I started to show signs of depression. At the time, I was in an internship. I was doing substance abuse counseling internship, and was just going through some stuff. I didn't know what it was. You know, I wasn't familiar with depression. I was more substance abuse and that kind of thing. But I was going through those symptoms, which we'll talk about some symptoms on tonight. And my boss told me that I was depressed, and I immediately denied it. I said, not me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not depressed. That's the devil. The devil is a lie. But that's when I really began to understand the importance of mental health. But I really didn't think too much of it until years later, where it really began to catch up with me. It really caught up with me. The Lord has blessed me to do some of the things that I've done, but you know, mental health does not discriminate. It hits all of us. It hits all of us. And in 2019 is where I was officially diagnosed. And it was with a clinical diagnosis called persistent depressive disorder, which is we call it a high functioning, low grade kind of depression where you can function, but it jumps on you like how they describe it, like a wet blanket that's just on you all the time. And you have different symptoms, and we'll talk about the symptoms in just a minute. But then I realized that, you know, I wasn't the only one. And I have been, for the past several years now, I've been pretty open about my battle. I don't call it a struggle. I used to call it a struggle. I'm battling it, my battle with depression. And I think it's important for us to understand, it's important for us to understand mental health as it relates to the whole person, all of us, like everything that makes me needs to be addressed, rather than I love the Lord, I love prayer, I can't say I love fasting, but fasting is something that I believe in. I believe in that. But we have to understand that everything is not just all spiritual. Yes, the spirit realm, absolutely. I believe in demons and they exist and they hinder and they do all those different kinds of things. They harass us and do those kinds of things as well. But we have to understand the whole person of who we are. We can first find that in Genesis chapter 2, verses 7, verses 15 and verse 18, where how God created us as a whole person. The Bible teaches us in verse 7, Genesis 2, verse 7, that God formed man from the dust of the ground, that's the body. He breathed into him his spirit, that's our spirit, and man became a living being or a living soul. That's the soul. The soul is comprised of the mind, the emotions, the will, the personality, how we think, how we feel, how we desire and decide, and our determinations and disciplines is found in the will. And then our personality, how God gave us the traits that he gave each and every one of us. And verse 15 says that he placed man in the garden, which means he gave Adam his assignment, his service, his ministry, the things that he's supposed to do. And then in verse 18, it says it's not good for man to be alone. He allowed us to understand the social side of us. All of those areas are extremely important in having a wholeness. You being whole, you being healthy. Being whole meaning complete. Being healthy, meaning fit to be used, the ability to be used, okay? And a lot of times what we will understand, or we need to understand, is that importance of our mental health. Everything is not just simply spiritual. We do believe in spiritual matters. We do believe in demonic activities and what have you else. But everything is not caused by demons. The more that we take personal responsibility for ourselves, and then for our families, and then for our community, then that's when we're going to start seeing more mental health, mentally healthy or fit to be used, okay? And that's just really what mental health is. It's psychological and emotional well-being, just what it is. It helps us to think, it helps us to feel, it helps us to decide or choose, it helps us to discipline ourselves, it helps us to function, it helps us to maneuver throughout society. You understand when you're having some issues with your mental health, when those normal things that you would normally do are being affected in a negative way. It can be several things that can be going on in your particular life at the moment that can cause you not to behave in a way in which you are actually functioning in a. Sometimes we have this argument when people say in a normal way, and they say, well, what's normal? What's normal, what's not normal. There's some things you know that ain't normal. It's not normal. Now, I talk to myself. I just don't talk with myself. The big difference. You start talking, we all talk to ourselves. Anthony, you could do this. Come on, man, let's go. Come on. You start talking, hey, Anthony, what you think? Well, I don't know. That's when that ain't normal. We can pretty much say that's not normal behavior. There are some things that we know that for the most part, especially when it comes to society and social norms and those kinds of things, those things which are normal and those things which are not. Amen? All right. Now, if anyone have any questions, you may ask questions, but we were instructed to make sure you use the microphone. So if you have questions, I think there's microphones on the seats there. If you do have a question, you go ahead and use the microphone. Let me stop right there. Any questions so far? All right, let me share this with you. I'm getting over a cold, y'all, so please excuse me. But I was actually kind of wondering if I wanted to talk about mental health as a whole in relation to the church. I did a seminar about that before, and how the mental health is stigmatized in the church, and how unfortunate that is. I'm a church boy. I'm a church apologist. But at the same time, you know, y'all know how it is with y'all families. Y'all can talk about them, but others can't, kind of thing. It's kind of with the church kind of thing. Go ahead, Pastor. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. That's a great question. Yes, that's a great question. He asked, what is the difference between mental health, behavioral health, and family health, and whatever? That's a great question. The mental health is that part of us that has to do with the thinking, feeling, the choosing. That's our will. Those kinds of things where our thinking may be off. And when I say off, I mean, it may be depression, it may be anxiety, it may be different other kinds of things that goes more on internally. Behavioral health has more to do with our behaviors. For an example, that would be substance abuse. That's a behavior. That would be, gambling. That's a behavior. Overeating or, even pornography or what have you would be considered behavioral health. Something is going on internally, we try to fix externally by doing the drugs or the gambling or the whatever it might be, the behavioral health. The family health has a lot more to do with the structure of the home or some of the things that may be going on in the home that may be destructive for the family unit. I tell the people this all the time. When God created family, God kind of knew what he was doing. God has an order to stuff. Whenever we get outside of God's order, then this is where we're going to have what we call a disorder. It's what we call mental health disorder, substance abuse disorder, or what have you, family disorder. Something is not in order the way it should be running structurally. When we talk even about family disorder, there is a way that God desires for us to have run our families. Now, we know every family is not a traditional type of family, and we know that there are single-parent families, there are blended families, and so forth and so on. There still should be some kind of order in those kinds of families, and this is why we're seeing a lot of our young people, in negative behaviors and those kinds of things, because there's something that's out of order. And the moment we get those things back in order is when you're going to start to see more positive results with you as an individual person or with your family or even in our communities and those kinds of things. So we got mental health that's more internal, our thinking, our feeling kind of thing going on. We got the behavioral health in terms of us behaving in destructive or non-constructive ways. Then we have that family health where something is going on, something is out of order in the family. Now, again, we know that in today's times, especially, unfortunately, even in our community, African-American community, the traditional family is way down on the bottom of the list when it comes to the types of families. Now, this is in every culture. It's not just in African-American culture, but traditional families are way down on the totem pole when it comes to the family structure. This is where we're seeing a lot of issues when it comes to our children and our families, marriages, and so forth. It's because we're out of order. Okay, great question. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Yep, absolutely. That's a great question. How do we encourage those who may be having some kind of behavioral disorder, in this case, substance abuse or alcohol or whatever it might be? How do we encourage them to go get help? First of all, what we're talking about is what we call a co-occurring disorder, or what it used to be called a dual diagnosis, which means more than one diagnosis. So we may be talking about a substance abuse disorder. It's kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing, where is it the substance abuse that's caused a mental health issue, or is it the mental health issue that causes the substance abuse, or the substance use, I should say, because I am depressed. Most people think that well, when they get depressed, they drink alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant, but it actually makes it worse. So you get more depressed when it comes to that. But sometimes it's someone that has, let's say again, depression or anxiety or whatever it might be. So I'm going to use a substance to help me to cope. But obviously, it starts to turn into an addiction. Now we got two diagnoses or two disorders going on at the same time. It's important for us to understand that because we need to know which one we need to treat. What's the root of this? Is it substance abuse? I drank, I smoked, or whatever else, and now I'm depressed because of it. Or was I depressed first or anxious first or whatever first, which caused me to drink or smoke or whatever else. Now I'm addicted to that particular substance. When it comes to families, now this is tough. I tell people this all the time. Here's the tough part. Here's the tough part. Because at some point, now you can talk to them, say son, daughter, husband, wife, whoever, it would be obviously beneficial for you to, go get help because of we're seeing this behavior, what have you. And if you don't go get help, I'm leaving, I'm out. Here's where a lot of people don't like. They don't like. That is when we start to set boundaries. And at some point, you got to set boundaries. You got to set some standards. You got to set some rules that goes on within your home. That if you don't go get help, then here's the consequence of this. Okay. Yes, go talk to them, pray for them, do those kinds of things. Most definitely do all of those things, and hopefully that will be enough to encourage them enough to go get help and that kind of thing. But if they don't, at some point, got to start setting some boundaries, and you got to start setting. And a boundary, just simply what I call a boundary, is just simply a rule. This is how we're going to live. This is how I'm going to do. This is what's going to happen. And it's based on your values. A boundary is made based on what you value. But whatever it is I value in my house, I value peace. So my boundaries are going to be based on peace. Whatever is not bringing me peace, don't set a boundary for that. You can go thus far, then if you cross that, here's the consequence. It's this or this or this. And a lot of times what people will do, as a matter of fact, there's a stage of grief. It's called bargaining. What bargaining is an anticipated loss. That if I'm drinking or whatever it is I'm doing, and you tell me if you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving, or you got to go, and I'm taking the kids with me, and we out, and what have you else, and then they anticipate the loss. That's what, for some people, they begin to grieve in that manner, and then that's when they do make an effort to change their behaviors. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work. There's a show, maybe y'all seen the show Intervention. There's a show called Intervention. Basically, it's a show that it's like a reality type show, and it's those who loved ones are doing drugs, whatever else. Then you have a lot of parents who are codependent. They're enabling them to continue in those behaviors and those kinds of things. And they set an intervention, and they say either you go to rehab or we cutting you off. A lot of times parents go, I don't want to do all that now. I don't want to do all that. Then if your values, if I value my peace or I value the rest of the family members of my home, their safety and those kinds of things, I'm doing this out of love. It's not selfish for you to set boundaries in your home. I talk with people all the time. Sometimes I talk with people all the time. Parents who've been living in their home for 25 years. They went to work every day, went to work sick. They paid their bills. They raised their kids. They did everything right. And then you got one that gets to live in the house scot-free. Ain't got to pay no bills. Ain't got to wash no clothes. Ain't got to cook no dinners. Ain't got to do nothing. Mom is breaking her back. I said, What? I got upset with her. So, Mom, she crying. 40-year-old man. He in there playing video games all day and smoking dope all day and whatever else. And how does this work? Mom, how does this work for you? Because you got to use this. You got to go. You're a 40-year-old man. Okay, I don't want to get off in all. Boundaries, setting boundaries with people, even those that may even have that may be depressed or what have you else. At some point, you got to say, we got to go, we got to get up, we got to go. I'm not one of those kind of therapists that's going to let you just kind of, at some point, we got to go. We got to get up and do something other than what you're doing. So if that doesn't work, where you just encourage a person to go get help for whatever it might be, and that doesn't work, now we got to start setting some boundaries. Did you say something? Oh, okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yes, sir. Oh, yeah, we got to use the mic. I'm sorry.
How do we resolve? How do we? How can we
So how do you forgive? Is that what you?
forgive the spiritual aspect?
Okay.
But the reality, man, we need to on from this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This person.
Oh no. Absolutely.
How do we resolve that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing, we do have to forgive. Let's just do what the Bible tells us to do and forgive. Now, after I forgive, now we got to set some boundaries. Now we got to set some parameters here, and that may mean you have to leave my life right now. That may mean that. That doesn't mean you are, just kicking them to the curb and what have you else. After you forgive, which forgiveness actually has to do, and this is how we kind of talk about forgiveness. For people who, a lot of people are not ready to forgive. They think they have forgiven. They're not ready to forgive, though. But what really happens is forgiveness is just simply, what do you owe me? What do you owe? Jesus said this, and I do use this. I don't use those script. I don't say, well, Matthew 6, and I get tempted sometimes. But Jesus said it. He said, when you pray, Matthew chapter 6, when you pray, he said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, the kingdom come, that will be done on earth as heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And then he said, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. A debtor is someone who owes me. Forgiveness is when you, whoever it might be, what I like to say is, you need to write a list of things you believe that person still owes you. For an example, I have one who, father, a 12-year-old girl or whatever, a father supposed to take her to Disneyland and do all these different kinds of things, and he didn't do it and what have you else. So now I encourage her to write a list of what she believed her father still owes her. She's in her 30s now. What is it that I believe he still owes me? Well, you owe me fatherhood. You owe me loyalty. You owed me protection. You owed me, love. You owed me, Disneyland. Now what I'm doing is I'm writing a list out, and I'm saying, okay, now I need to release him or her, whoever it is. I need to release them from that debt. This is what we call a grudge. Holding a grudge. Holding a grudge means you owe me, and I will not let it go until you pay me back. I will not let it go till you pay me back. Because there are basically two things that we're wanting when we're not forgiving someone. We either want justice, or we want them to suffer. We want them to feel what we felt when they hurt us. And that's why I'm gonna keep on, and or we want justice. Well, that's close to the same thing, but I really want them to feel hurt like I felt hurt. God, it's not right for me to have to forgive him. I got to feel this thing, and they don't have to feel this thing. God, that ain't right. And God said, I know that's what you did to me. You owe me, but I paid the price. It's paid. Forgiveness is just simply forgiving the debt, letting the debt go. Once I do that, however, that doesn't mean I got to continue to let you come in and just do all kinds of, do all kinds of crazy stuff in my life, because now I'm going to set some boundaries. Now we're going to set some standards. We're going to set some rules. You're not able to do this, 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 this. If you're not able to abide by those standards and that I set for myself, then you have to go. That's one of the hardest things for people to do, is to let folks go. People, we don't want to let people go. We want them to do right. Just do right. If you just do right, we'll be okay. But they have a choice not to do right. The first thing you do, we got to forgive. And then, then you gotta move on. Gotta move on. You're not outside of God's will if you tell somebody, you got to get out of my life. If you're hurting me, I'll give you whatever information you need to have in order to be in my life. But if you choose not to do that, that's one of the hardest things. I say that quite a bit because I have a lot of parents who most of them are parents, a lot of parents who just don't, they just don't want to do that. But forgiveness is the main thing. And I also believe this, when we're doing it the way God tells us to do it, and this is not cliche. Like I said, I was raised in church, so I know all the cliches and stuff, but this is not cliche. God will really direct you, show you what to do with certain people who are hurting you and, all that. The Holy Ghost actually will instruct you on what to do. He will lead you. It is like he's got your hand and he's just holding like a little child. Just, go do this, go do that. We call that's cliche for a lot of folk. Oh man, you always say stuff like that. That's really the truth. That once I forgive, now I can depend on God doing what he says he's going to do in his word. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
About the guilt.
Guilt.
Roger. And mad. Guilty.
Yep.
About.
This is what I tell people about guilt. I like to think of it as like in a court of law when we're talking about guilt. And for each of us, we serve four positions when we're talking about guilt. Number one, we serve as our own prosecutor. Number two, we serve as our own defense attorney. Number three, we serve as our own judge. And number four, we are the defendant. We play all of those roles at one time. The prosecutor, and we're talking about guilt, because we know that in a court of law, a competent judge, he or she will never convict somebody based on no evidence. What we will have a tendency to do when we feel guilty, that word feel, we feel guilty. That's when we serve as our prosecutor. The prosecutor, me, the prosecutor, Anthony or Sally or Jimmy or whoever, the prosecutor will always try to present evidence based on feelings. Well, I feel this, I feel, and the defendant is still you. So you saying, well, I kicked my son out of the house, man, I feel. And that's not right, because a mother should never feel, she shouldn't have done that. She should feel guilty. She shouldn't have done. That's what the prosecutor, that's you, will say to the judge, which is you. The defense attorney says, hold on, well, let's look at the facts. The prosecutor uses feelings as evidence. The defense attorney uses the facts as evidence. Well, let's look at the facts. Well, what did he do? Well, he came to my house and brought drugs in my house. I told him 15 times, don't bring drugs in my house. The next time you do, da-da-da-da, whatever, because the police banging on my door. I don't want you. Those are the facts. So now, and I'm speeding this up, but the prosecutor, you, presents feelings as evidence. The defense attorney, you, presents facts as evidence. Now you got to serve as the judge. And as the judge has to, in a natural court of law, the judge takes both sides of evidence and now has to make a decision based on the evidence. That's what we do with ourselves. And many times we side on the prosecutor's side about how I feel. So we let people back in our lives that really shouldn't be there because we feel, versus the defense side that says, well, here are the facts. Now the judge says, you know what? Now I do feel guilty because I did this, but what did I actually do wrong? That's what I ask people when they say, I feel so guilty. I ask them, what did you do wrong? Most of them say, well, I ain't do nothing wrong. I said, well, now that's because now you acting as a prosecutor. You're prosecuting yourself for doing nothing wrong. I have had to learn not to feel guilty about stuff anymore. I'm not trying, I don't want to, because I didn't do anything wrong. I had to look out for my best interests and what have you else. I'm not trying to feel guilty if I didn't do anything wrong. Now, if I did something wrong, then as we do, we pay the fine, or we, do the community service or whatever we got to do if you found guilty, because there's enough evidence for the judge says, okay, you're guilty. You're guilty. If I hurt somebody or did something wrong, I say, well, did I do something wrong? Okay, here's what I did wrong. I got to pay that back. How do I pay that back? I apologize. This is why we say things like this. You owe me an apology. That's the term. You owe me an apology. We want that. That's what you owe me. At least as an apology. Now, again, when you start to feel guilty, you gotta question yourself about your feelings, not to be led by what you feel. What is the factual evidence? What's the actual evidence? What is the logical evidence regarding your decision? Excuse me, regarding your decision. So when I'm talking about feeling guilt, I need to take a step back and say, what am I doing wrong? What did I do wrong? Let me investigate. And 9 times out of 10, you're gonna say to yourself, I ain't do nothing wrong. But you know what? I ain't gonna be guilty. I ain't gonna feel guilty. I'm not gonna go. That's what OJ did. OJ didn't care what none of y'all said. When Judge Ito said not guilty, he was only concerned about one voice. That was Judge Ito. Everybody else, he was murderer, he'll kill. I don't care. I'm walking out of here. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to hit some golf balls and some tennis balls. I don't care what y'all say. He was guilty. I think he. But. So what I'm saying is, the guilt. When you're feeling guilty, what did I do wrong? What am I doing wrong? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is nothing. But if I'm led by my feelings, I'm gonna say I'm doing everything wrong. I'm a bad mother. I'm a bad father. I'm a bad husband. I'm a bad wife. I'm a bad this. I'm a bad that. And when you actually just look at it, you say, I'm not doing anything wrong. So I'm not gonna walk in guilt or shame. Nothing like that. Good question. All right, anybody else? All right, real quick then. I did kind of want to talk about just a couple things about mental health and what have you else. I was going to really talk about depression because that's really my issue is the depression thing. But many people, even more so than depression, many people are actually struggling more with anxiety. Anxiety, depression, traumas, a lot of unresolved traumas that people have when they were 7 years old or 5 years old or 12 years old or what have you else. And we have what we call an acute trauma, and then we have what we call a chronic kind of trauma where for some of you all, an acute trauma happened right then, right there. A car accident or something that happened right then, right there. Some of you all are going through more of a complex, chronic kind of trauma where you have had experience from age 5 to 17, dysfunctional family and on domestic violence, and you're getting beat up every day and 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 every day. Now you're an adult, you're out of the house, and you think you're free till all that stuff start coming back. And this is what a lot of times people start thinking about or start to live their lives based on being traumatized. And eventually we will see the results of you being traumatized. Yes, go ahead,
somewhere.
Right.
Is there treatment?
That's a great question. Yes, let me talk about the anger for a moment, because anger is what we would call a secondary, God bless you, Bishop. Anger is what we would call a secondary emotion, which means that, and anger is one of those topics, if you will, where we can identify. We know anger, but what we don't know is what we would call primary emotions. Secondary emotion, anger is a secondary emotion. In other words, that's one of the feelings we feel second. In other words, something happens, the first thing I don't feel is anger. It's a secondary emotion. Let's say rejection. Let's use rejection for an example. Something happens, the first thing I feel is rejected, then I feel angry. I get angry not because of what happened, I get angry because I got rejected. When I got rejected because of what happened. Embarrassed, disrespected, same thing. Somebody said something to me, the first thing, that's not the first thing you felt. The first thing you felt was embarrassed. Because I felt embarrassed, I got angry. We can take that biblically. Genesis chapter 4, the story of Cain and Abel. We know that God told Cain, I'm paraphrasing, get it right, because you about to sin. Sin is crouching at your door, you about to sin. The first thing that Cain did not feel was anger towards actually his brother, or even anger towards God. I believe the first thing he felt was rejection. God said, I reject your offering. And a lot of times what we will do is we will personalize. When someone rejects something, we think they're rejecting someone. And when God told Cain, I reject your offering, I accept your brothers, but I reject yours. I don't know about y'all, but if God told me that, I'm gonna feel rejected. And now I probably this is where we start getting mad at God. A lot of people are angry at God because God, you did this and you allowed this to happen. You did these things. They're not angry with what happened. They're angry. We get angry because of a primary emotion. So when we're talking about the treatment, what we want to do is we want to, yes, anger management is good. That's a good thing to learn. But what we really want to learn is how to overcome rejection. How to overcome embarrassment, because actually embarrassment is tied into your identity. And one of the things that the serpent did with Eve was attacked her identity, her image and her identity. So that started way back then. But the identity, embarrassment, disrespected is another way we could say devalued. So when you step on my shoe and you don't say, I'm sorry, then you just devalued me. So what I got to do is I got to get that value back. How am I going to get it back? I'm going to punch you in the face. Or I'm going to behave in a way to get back what I believe you owe me. You owe me respect, and you stepped on my shoe and you didn't say sorry. That means you devalued me, and I'm not going to be devalued in front of all of my boys right here or all of my girls right here. I'm not going to do all that, so I'm going to behave in a certain way. So now what we do, yes, we do have to address the anger, but we also have to address your feelings of rejection, your feelings of embarrassment, dejection, which can lead to depression, and all those different kinds of things. So this is why we have, now it's out now, emotional intelligence, the ability to understand your emotions and know how to regulate your emotions, and learn how to change your emotions. You can change your feelings. You don't have to stay in a particular feeling. You can change how you feel. So even in prison, and I'm not real familiar with the prison system, but I would even encourage those kinds of classes be taught, because there are so many good people in jail because of their emotions. They're not bad people. They just did not know how to regulate their emotions. They made a mistake. They did something impulsively, and now they got 5 years, 10 years, 2 months, whatever it is. It's because they did not know how to regulate their emotions because they didn't understand their emotions. They only understood anger. And in our community, in the Black community, we see a whole lot of anger. We see a whole lot of anger. Now, the unfortunate thing for us is we have a tendency to justify it. You say, I'm angry because, so then when you say I'm angry, now we want to understand what the cause of the anger is because it is not the event. It's it's that primary emotion, how I feel about a certain thing. Excuse me. How I feel about the event. Then that leads me to my anger. So anger management is good. That's good. I'm gonna say this last thing about this because this is important. This is depression. One of the let me just say this real quick. One of the symptoms of depression is irritability. Someone gets real angry or irritable. Now, for a lot of people, to society, irritability looks like anger. So now when I'm seeing someone who is irritable, the first thing I'm not asking is, are they depressed? I'm going to say, well, that's just an angry man. So let's send him not to therapy, let's send him to anger management classes. When the problem is not the anger, it's more of the depression. So now this is why even in the Black church and Black community, I believe we have more people depressed than they even know, because many of us don't even know what depression is. I didn't know what depression was until my boss told me, Anthony, you're depressed. I said, no, I ain't. I don't know what you're talking about. I ain't. Devil is a lie. I know there is no truth found in the devil, but that was the truth what she told me. The devil didn't tell me that. She told me, Anthony, you're depressed. And I don't know what you're talking about. I'm depressed. I don't know. Until depression caught up with me and kicked my hinder parts. This is why I had to know I had to go get help. This is why I don't mind talking about that, because I know so many of you all here need help. Even if you don't admit it, I'll admit it for you. Y'all need some, no, I'm just playing. So that's a great question, Pastor. Anger can be considered a secondary emotion. So we got to understand the primary emotion, because that's really more of the root of the problem, is the primary emotion over the secondary emotion. Anybody else? Because I do want to just real quick, I know we run out of time, but real quick, talk about the stigmas. And just real quick, just touch on the stigmas, because we do in the Black, this is in every community, actually. This is just about every community. It's not just a Black community. It's about every community that has a stigma when it comes to mental health. What's happening now, however, which is good, is that we're starting to break these walls down and starting to talk a little bit more and become a little bit more comfortable with talking about mental health, because actually I think a lot of people understood. I kind of joked about it, but I think we kind of understood there's some folk in our families, we got some. We ain't want to say nothing about Uncle Joe. We ain't want to say nothing about Uncle Joe. There's something wrong with Uncle Joe. We just don't want to say those kinds of things. But when we just get honest with ourselves and say, you know what, I need to go talk to somebody real quick. Psychotherapy or therapy, talk therapy is what we call it, basically talk therapy, and different other things that you could do. I'm going to tell y'all this one last thing. Y'all watch what you eat. Diet and exercise will affect your brain in a positive way. Us eating all these processed foods and fried foods, there is a nerve called the vagus nerve in our bodies that's connected to the brain and the digestive system. And there is a lot of, if we learn to eat better, your mental health will improve. Your sleeping will improve. Your just overall your energy will improve, based upon what we eat. What we eat, how we exercise, is, go get some vitamin D in the sunlight, just go outside, whatever else. And those kinds of things, you don't always have to take medication. You can some of y'all need to take medication. Y'all need some medication. But medication should be temporary. You shouldn't be on the same medication for 20 years. Medication should be temporary. I took medication. And the medication for me, the first time I took it, it didn't work for me. The first one, it didn't work for me. I went back to my doctor and said, this is not working. So she gave me another one. Now, what it did for me is it took away that what we call brain fog. It took away that thing that was just circling in my head. It was pushing me down. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think. I couldn't concentrate. My memory, I couldn't remember anything. But when I started taking that medication temporarily, it lifted that fog out of my brain. I was able to now at least focus on some things. That's what medication is supposed to do. I like to call medications Pepto-Bismol for the brain. Now, I like to explain that to people that I don't want to take no medication, well, then you don't want to take no Pepto-Bismol in. Pepto-Bismol is like, I call it Pepto-Bismol for the brain. We know when we have an upset stomach, we take Pepto-Bismol, it settles your stomach down. That's the same thing with medications. You take the medication, it just should settle your brain down. Bring some balance to your brain that now will allow you to learn new skills, allow you to learn coping skills and those kinds of things that will help you to function in your life. We talked about mental health, a disorder when you're not able to function as you should. That's a good sign, y'all, that you need some kind of help. Are you functioning as you normally would? Or are you struggling through normal things you normally like to do? If you are, go get some help. Go get some help. Go get some help. Go do some things that's going to help you. It's going to help your mental health. It's really that simple. And I promise you this last thing. If y'all take medication, y'all still saved. You ain't less saved if you go get therapy. God ain't disappointed in you because you didn't go to him first. Well, that's what we do need to do now. Don't misunderstand me. We do go to God, and God will say, well, go to therapy. God will tell you to go to therapy. Well, God, you my great counselor. I'm counseling you now. Go get some therapy. So I do want to make that point very clear to us. However, as a body of believers, our mental health, we got to start taking down those stigmas, shattering those stigmas. Go get you some help. I promise you, we're not going to look at you any different. Well, sister so-and-so, brother so-and-so, no, y'all all right. You okay. Go get therapy. Go get therapy and just go get checked out. We call it an evaluation. Go get evaluated and see what they say and then go from there. Amen?
God bless you, sir. Can we appreciate Pastor Anthony Harris? Thank you so very much. Lord said the same. We'll be hearing him a little bit later. With that being said,